Hello and welcome to the channel. And in the last video we looked at how to create a Firebase project, and in this video we'll be looking at how to connect that project to our Flutter app, and also continue to learn how to create, read, update and delete data in Firestore, right? So in VS Code I have a simple Flutter app running, and I've already set some things up. So I've already set up my theme for the app, and then also I've added some packages. So let's take a look at them. So in the perspec.yaml file, I've added 3 packages. That's the Google Fonts package, Flex Color Scheme, that's what I'm using for the theming of the app. This video is not much about UI, so I won't go much into the theming, but I'll leave a link to the source codes so that you can take a look at them. Also, I've added another package called Iconly. That's what we'll be using for our icons, right? And when we take a look at our theme, this is just how we configure Flex Color Scheme. So I have my light theme and then my dark theme as well. I also have a variable called input padding. That's what we'll be using for padding in all our inputs, right? So the first thing is connecting this app to the project we created on Firebase. And if you haven't watched that video, I'll leave a link in the description so that you can take a look at it. Now, in order to connect a Flutter app to a Firebase project, you first have to go to your terminal, and in this case we are using the Flutter Fire CLI tool. And if you don't know how to use that, or you haven't installed it on your system, I have a tutorial on that. I'll also leave that in the description so you take a look at it. So you go to your terminal and then you type Flutter Fire configure, right? So this will bring up all your projects on Firebase, so it may take some time. So I have the project here, and this is the one we created on Firebase, Contact Manager. So I'm going to select that one, and then you have to choose which platform you'll be configuring this project for. For now I'm building only for Android, so I'm going to stay with the default. If you are working on iOS, you just have to switch using the space bar to select. So I'm just selecting Android. This will ask you if you want to overwrite certain files in your Gradle folders, your Gradle file. So you just go with yes, and that's it. That's all it takes to set up a Firebase and Flutter project. If you go to our directory, realize we have some warnings over here in our Firebase _options file. This is because we are importing a package called Firebase Core, which does not exist. So we will go to our perspec.yaml file and add some dependencies. We first add the Firebase Core dependency, which is the main dependency needed to run any Firebase project in Flutter. Also, based on what you'll be doing, you may add different packages, right? And in this project you'll be looking at Firestore, so we'll have to add the Firestore dependency, which is cloud Firestore, and then add the latest version. After that, you can go to your terminal and run flutter pub-get. So this will make sure that you have the latest dependencies in your project. Okay, so after this the errors should be gone, and now we have to initialize Firebase in our project. So you first go to your main.dat file, and the main function you convert it to an asynchronous function. Now before we run our app, we want to connect Firebase to our app, right? So we first have some 2 codes we have to write here, and then the first one is widget flutter binding dot ensure initialize. Then the next one is the initialization of Firebase itself. So we are going to await Firebase dot initialize app, and then it has an optional options parameter, and we are going to pass that options parameter because the Firebase Flutter Fire CLI generated this Firebase options for us default, so we just have to use that. And then it has the name default Firebase options dot current platform. So after this, you would have to stop your app and then rerun it again. So I'm going to stop my app and then I'll rerun it again. Okay, so when you run the app, you may realize your app won't run, and you may have some warnings or errors in your console. So when we open our debug console, we have some warnings here which states that the plugin Cloud Firestore requires a higher Android SDK version. And if you have come across this warning before, it's very easy to fix. All you have to do is you have to go to your Android app build.gradle file and then change the default config. In the default config, change the main SDK version to something above 18, right? So you have a link in the console that takes you to the build.gradle file. I'm going to click on it, and here in the build.gradle file, you scroll down to where you have your Android section, and then you look for default config, and in the default config you look for main SDK version and change it from Flutter main SDK version to anything above 18, so 19, 20, 21. I'm going to change mine to 21 and then save the file. Then run the app again. Okay, so if your app now runs successfully, then it means Firebase has been connected to your app, right? So you now have Firebase connected to your app, and the first thing I would want us to do is go to the home page. And since we'll be displaying our contacts in the home page, I wanted to start working from where we create our contacts. So we first start learning about how to create documents in Firestore. So within the scaffold, I'm going to create a floating action button, and I'm going to use the extended version of the floating action button, and then the label is going to be a text that says add contact, and we also have an icon. So the icon will be iconly, so the package we added for our icons, the broken version dot document. So that's the icon I'm using for the add contacts, and that's the icon you see here. And when we press on this add contact, we want to navigate to a page where we will add the contact. So let's first create that page. So in my pages folder, in the lib directory, I'm going to create a file called add contact page.dat, and this is going to be a stateful widget, and the name is going to be add contact page, right? And we are going to return an empty scaffold for now, then an app bar, with the title add contact. Now back in our home page, when we press on this button, we want to navigate to the add contact page. So in the press of this floating action button, we can navigate with the push. So navigator.push, and then our route is going to be a material page route, and then the builder is the function that returns the page we want to go to. So add contact page, and with this, when we press on this button, we should be able to move to the add contact page. So when I press on it, we are now on add contact page. Now in the add contact page, this is where we build our UI for adding the contact. And as I said earlier, this video is not going to focus much on the UI, so I'm going to speed things up a bit. So in the body of our scaffold, we are going to have a list view, and then within the children we are going to have a form, and then the child of this form is going to be a column with some children. Now the children of this column will be text form fields, which are inputs. So text form fields, and we are going to have 3 of them, but let's first work on the first one, then we will duplicate them and change some variables and parameters. So the first text form field will have some decoration, which will be an input decoration. Then within the input decoration, this is where we have our hint text, and that will be the name of the contact we want to add. So when we save, we should have this, and you realize our design doesn't look well because it is touching the edges of our screen. So within the list view, let's give some padding, and padding all around of 14. And also in our input decoration, let's change the content padding to be our input padding variable. So we have this input field, and there are some things I want to do as well. So I want to add validation to this input field. So within the text form field, we have the validator property we can use, and this is a function that takes in a value, and this is the value the user enters in this input field. And before we submit this form, this whole form, we will first have to run this validator function. And when we run this validator function, we want to check that all the input fields are not empty, right? So how we do it is, within the validator function, we can have an if statement that checks if this value is not empty, or if this value is empty, right? So if this value is empty, then we want to return an error message to this user. So we want to return something like, please enter a name. And so this is going to be our simple validation for our text form field. And also we want to add a property on this field that's called text input action, and that's what will show on the keyboard. So instead of this down here, we want to put next, so that when the user presses on this button, it takes the user to the next input field. So the text input action for this particular input is going to be text input action dot next. Also, we would have to have a way of accessing the values in our input field. So we would have to create a controller that will allow us to access the values in this field, right? So when we submit, we want to get a value in the field. And how we do that is under our state, we are going to create a text editing controller, and for now I'm just going to create one for each of our fields we are going to have. So I'm going to create one for the name field. I'm going to call it name controller, which is going to be a text editing controller. And then we are going to pass this controller to our text form field. So this is how we can access values in our field, and this is basically how all our text form fields are going to be. So I'm just going to duplicate this several times, and we first have to have some sizer box for spacing. So I'm going to have a sizer box of height 20 for spacing, and then I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to copy this and then paste several times. Then the last part will be our button. So I'm going to increase the sizer box height to 40, and then we are going to have an elevated button with an icon. And then for now, the onPress is going to be an empty function, and the label will be a text that says maybe add contact, and then the icon will be from our iconly package. So iconly broken dot add user. Now I want my button to fill out the entire space, so the width. I'm going to wrap it in an elevated, but in the sizer box. So I was supposed to wrap with the sizer box, and then give it a width of double dot infinity. So this will make sure that my button stretches to the end of my screen. Now I'm going to quickly change the controllers, and then also add a form key. That's what will help us in the validation. So I'm going to copy the controllers and then paste them in. And then I'm going to change these controllers, right? So the first one is what we designed from scratch, and then the second one is going to be our phone controller. And then if the value is empty, we want to give the one please enter a phone number, or please enter a phone number. So please enter a phone number, and the hint text is going to be phone as well. Also the last one is going to be our email controller, and then please enter an email, and then the hint text is going to be an email. So when we save, we should have these changes. And also we want to run this validation whenever the user interacts with these forms. So there is a property we can also add, which is auto validate mode, and then we set it to auto validate mode dot on user interaction. So this will perform the validation every time that the user interacts with this text form field. I'm going to copy this property and paste it on all our text form fields. And now this is the UI for creating the contacts. Now before we continue, I want to explain some basic terminologies when it comes to database in Firestore. So in Cloud Firestore, a database is structured as a collection of documents, and each document may contain multiple fields with different data types. So we can have a field like just as you can see, we have name, phone, and then email, and then they are both different type of data. This can be a number, right? So we can even make this more strict here, and then change the type of input. So if I'm right, we can change the keyboard type, and then this takes a text input type of so there is going to be a phone number, right? So text input type of phone, and then we can also change it for our email. So text input type of email address, so that our keyboard will automatically switch. So as you can see, my keyboard has switched to a number based input, and this is just a normal keyboard, and this also has the @ symbol and then the .com for email, right? So we can clearly see that these two types are strings, and then obviously we are expecting number for this, right? So in Cloud Firestore you can save multiple types of data, and also a collection can be a group of documents that have a similar purpose, right? A document is a single record in a collection, and can contain fields of data as well as nested collections. Each document may have a unique identifier called a document ID. So for each document we create in our Firestore database, there should be an ID for identifying that particular document, and this ID may be assigned by Firestore, which is Firebase, directly when we create it, or we can specify our own if we want to. So let me just give you an overview of all this. A collection may act like having a folder, right? So it's like having a folder on your computer, and a document is like a file in that folder. Just like you can have multiple files in a folder, you can also have multiple documents in a collection. So an example of this may be, imagine if you have a collection called users that contains documents representing each of our apps users, right? So each user document might contain fields such as name, email, and age. So each contact in our app may contain fields like name, phone, and then email, as well as nested collections. But in this case we're not dealing with nested collections, so we'll just stick with this ideology for now, right? So we have a collection called contacts, and then that is like a folder. Now within each contact we are going to have our contact itself, which is the document, and each document, which is the contact or a user, may have name, phone, and then email, right? So that's how database and the database structure in Firestore is done. Now let's look at how we can create this, or we can pass this data to Firestore. That's create this in Firestore. So on the add contact button, we have an on press, and when we press on this button, we want to check if the form is valid. If it is valid, then we want to pass this data to our database, or in other words, we want to save this to our database. So let's look at how we can do that. So let's create a function under our state, and we have to pass this form key to our form. So we pass the key as form key, and this is what will help us in our validation. So let's create a function called add contacts. So I'm going to create a function that does return nothing, so void add contact, and this is going to be an asynchronous function, and this is the function we will perform all our operations in. So the first thing we want to do when we press on this add contact, or we call this add contact function, is we want to check if all our text form fields are valid, that's they obey our validation rules that we have passed. In other words, they are not empty, they contain at least something, right? If they contain something, then we can proceed with adding that data to Firestore. So we can check that with our form key. So that's going to be if our form key dot current state dot validate and then we have a warning: validate can't be unconditionally invoked. So we would have to use the now assertion operator. So we are saying that we are sure this current state will be available. And then if we have if our form is valid, then we proceed with adding the data to Firebase. Else we want to show a warning, a snack bar or anything, right? So if this is not valid, then we want to show a warning to the user. So I'm going to use a snack bar here, and then we are going to use scaffold messenger dot of context dot show snack bar, and then we are going to pass in our snack bar widget, and then the content is going to be a text which says please fill all the fields. And let's add this let's use this add contact function. So on press of the elevated button, I'm going to pass this add contact function just like this, and now let's press on the add contact and see, and we get this snack bar, please fill all the fields. And we also realize our validation is getting fired, so we are getting the warnings, please enter a name, and then please enter an email and a phone number, right? So if it's valid, then we want to do something, right? So what we want to do is we want to call Firebase Firestore and then add some documents, right? And in Firebase Firestore, you don't have to create a collection, you don't have to create documents just like you have to create it ahead of time. No, we don't do that. It's not like the traditional SQL where you have to create tables. If the document exists or if the collection exists, Firebase is going to use it. If it doesn't exist, it's going to create a new one, right? And I first want to wrap all this in a try catch, so that if any error happens, I'll be able to catch it, and then it's not going to break my app. So on the catch, I'm not going to catch any error or any exception. I'm going to catch only Firebase exception, right? So on Firebase exception, I want to do something. Now within the try block, this addition of documents to Firebase is an asynchronous operation, so we will have to await it, right? So I'm going to await Firebase Firestore dot instance. So this our database. This Firebase Firestore dot instance is our database. Now we have some methods on it, so we can call dot collection, and then the name of the collection we want to refer to, right? So we want to refer to the contact collection, which does not exist yet, but Firebase will create it for us because it does not exist. And then we want to add something to this collection, and then this is our data. Now our data is supposed to be a map of string and then dynamic. So this data is the document we are adding, and every document must be a map which has a string, that's the key, and then the data which can be of any type, so dynamic. Now the data we want to add is first our name, and then the value is going to be our name controller dot text, that's the text within it, and we want to trim it. So if the user adds empty spaces either to the end or to the start of the name, we are not going to save that to the database. Also we want to add our phone, and that is going to be our phone controller dot text dot trim, and then we are going to do that for our email as well, and that is going to be email controller dot text dot trim. Now on Firebase exception, we just want to copy this snack bar and tell the user there was an error adding this contact to Firebase. So let's change the message there was, or something simple like failed to add, if I can spell failed, so failed to add contact, right? Now this is what will add the user to our Firebase. After this user has been added, we want to navigate to the home page, right? Because we want to see the user that was added. So we can optionally pop from this page, and we are using navigator.pop here. Right, and if you have this linting, we do not use bird context across async gap. Just wrap this in an if statement and then check if it is mounted. Then you can run whatever code you want to run. Right, so let's first check if our everything works, and then we are able to add this user or this contact to Firebase. So in the name, I'm going to just write in name, and then the phone is going to be a number. Now the email is going to be just any email, right? And now if we are able to add this user to Firebase, then we should navigate back to the home page automatically, and we shouldn't have any errors. So let's try again and add this user. So I'm going to hit on the add contacts, and realize we are back to the home page, which means we've successfully added this user to our Firebase. Let's try again to add another user. And this also works. So now let's take a look at what we are having on Firebase Firestore. So I'm going to my console, and then I'm going to the contact manager app, and let's check our Firestore database. And then realize we have the contact collection, and we have two documents here, right? So the first document has an ID, and there's the document ID, and we have the data, which is our email, name, and then phone, right? So we have two data here, and that's the only collection we have, right? So we're actually successful in adding data to our Firebase Firestore collection. Now in the next video, we'll look at how to get this data from Firestore and then display them on our home page, as well as editing and deleting this data. So if you don't want to miss that part of the video where we'll be concluding everything about the contact manager app, then please like, subscribe, and then share the video as well, so that you don't miss when I upload that one. So I'll see you in the next one.